Family constellation is a very powerful method that allows us in a short time to see and understand the underlying causes between many important life issues such as relationship, work issues, issues related to health, money, creativity, and many others. In systemic therapy, we look at an individual not as an isolated entity, but as being part of a greater whole, like a family, or like a culture, like a country, like a social group, where each person has an influence on everybody else. And the uniqueness of family constellation is that it understands that even people from past generations, even people we have never met in our life, can have a strong influence on us and on our behavior. And in family constellation, we understand how these people have an influence on us. And we learn that we cannot do just what we want to do, but we are part of a greater whole, and our life and our destiny has to be looked at in this whole context. Family constellation as a method is rather simple. We take people from a group to play important members of our system, of our family, and we use them as representatives. So some people are placed in a room and they become the mother, the father, the brother, and somebody for the client. And by watching their positions and also the way they move and behave, we can understand and start to see an essential dynamic that is ordinarily not so visible. So in a very short time, one can see what is the essential point and where the problem is, rather than going into a long analysis of a problem with a client. So you can see in the constellation what is the underlying cause, and then from the movement of the representatives you see what is an entanglement and who is identified with whom. And you can also see what would serve healing and how a person could come out of an entanglement. In the original way of family constellations, representatives were placed by the client and himself, and then the therapist would watch the picture and then make some arrangements, some new arrangements, so that people are standing in a more harmonious way. So it was rather much depending on the therapist's interventions. In the new way of family constellation, representatives are more free to move and to follow their own impulses, and the intervention of the therapist are much less. So in a way one could say we trust more the representatives and what they feel and how they want to move, and more subtle dynamics can become visible. So also the therapist learns from watching the constellation and can see what is a difficulty and also what will help the healing, and give that picture and give that insight, pass that on to the client. So all real healing actually comes from life itself. So it's not the therapist who is a healer. The therapist just creates a space where some movements and some truths can become visible, and then the client can see that and absorb that inside of himself, and that will serve the healing. But the healing itself may not happen within one session. It's just a client finds a new direction in life in the session, and his whole process of change and transformation may take a longer time. Family constellation is offered in workshops of 3 to 5 days, where people work on personal issues and learn from each other. By watching other people's dynamic, they learn to understand their own dynamic better. In trainings, which are 8 days, part 1, part 2 8 days, and part 3 training is also 8 days, we look at the parent-child relationship, we look at the original family and the dynamics that happens in an original family. And they learn to understand the difference. When we are in an original family, we have to learn to leave responsibility to our parents. and we have to accept our helplessness as a child. In a present family, we have to learn to take responsibility. If we are a parent or a partner, we have responsibility, and we have to learn to grow up. So there is an essential difference between an original and the present family. And the difference comes: in one case we are a child, and in another case we are an adult. And in family constellation we see how these two operate together, and the problems often arise because we try to take as a child too much responsibility, and then we are not able as an adult and as a father or a husband to take enough responsibility. So this is something we learn and we start to understand. And we also understand the movement of conscience, how conscience operates in us, and how conscience leads to essential entanglements. In a level 2 training and an advanced training, people learned how to work with constellations, and they learn the position and the attitude of a facilitator of family constellation, and how to help a client in this non-intrusive way to grow and to move also ultimately beyond family. So we learn also, participants also practice, and they learn to use that work in many of their own professions where they are working in social work, in therapy, or in other works where they can use the insights of family constellation.